these teachers, all the creepy teachers.
What she said, she was like, put your mic here. You can have your conversation. I was like,
I know. How have you been though?
that was awesome. She's hearing us right now, so. Hi, Denise. Hi, Denise.
Oh my God, I'm
You're
so
the
glad I
best.
wasn't.
And so is everyone at Local Floor. Best people in the world. Best people in the world. Totally Denise grew up as an
Is it viral?
Never
I got bit by a ball, probably. Covered in funnel.
I looked like. Yeah.
So that was like, I've never seen anything like that. So,
It looks like a movie.
I mean, that's another thing I've been thinking about it too, is like, if any of these people will Detroit, like, properties for some reason, is there,
I don't know. I was reading the comments. This
they
looks
have
like it's
done
done on purpose. I kinda am.
as someone who doesn't feel like they fall in that category, I see where a lot of people are coming from with that kind of opinion.
It's just the timing. The timing just seems. I don't want to speculate, but
None of us do, but it's hard not to in our own heads, but I know what you're thinking about, so.
yikes.
But it's just wild stuff, but no, how have you been?
I've been good. I've been good. You know, just enjoying life.
Yeah, I like the social media stuff you've been doing.
I've been trying to do more of it. It's hard, but I just gotta stay consistent, I guess.
Well, we've been trying to do some similar things. It's just like, it's too much to do. Our purpose was like, this is how we
I feel like I'm slacking. I'm glad everyone else sees, because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do more.
I bring your name up as an example of like, look, this is how we reach the audience that hasn't been watching news for 4 years.
Yeah,
This is how we
that's what I've noticed too. Ever since they were watching this, I've been like, getting so many followers and just, oh my God, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that?
one for desire, like this case.
Oh,
And it's just like, I don't know if that video that's on the other views, just so many times by TikTokers
oh,
who are
really?
like,
I'm not even on TikTok.
well, I'm not either. My photog is big time on TikTok. I just on TikTok. Like,
That's horrible. That is so bad.
he's definitely got different and I like him a lot, so I don't even judge him, but it's like I see more
Reliable
coverage.
source.
Well, I see more coverage come up scrolling through TikTok. A lot of people taking their information. That's horrible. For me, it was just like,
Advertise. I mean, you really can't.
I know. It is not a huge goal. Receive these calls.
Yeah, no worries.
What's happening?
It's getting so big.
He's in the
It is
not baby room anymore.
Not baby room.
So for the daycare, he was in the baby room and now he's in the next step up.
I assume he moved up there.
Yeah, he's moving up. He's kind of like
Check 1, 2, 3. Mic check 1, 2, 3. Sibilance.
the other rooms start getting too crazy. Two babies.
Yes.
This room is like, oh, there's only like 3 or 4 of them.
Is the stuff you're putting up here
It's called the
are you making that available?
In Oxford.
Yes, if you need the photographs, we can send you the photographs. I can also send you the QR code and the PayPal link for the donation if you need it. Just let me know afterward, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I
Thank
think that there's one on Southfield.
No, it makes sense. I know it's like kind of a chain of them, but
In
Yeah.
Oxford?
there's one of them up by us, and then I think they have like, oh yeah, we have. Because when Allie got her job at 7 and I was still at Team 5, we moved there to be sort of in the middle. We just kind of stayed there.
I love it.
Real by us, like to be like a town over.
It's just. Yeah. It's just cool.
Absolutely,
Like, I
yeah.
really can't imagine going on community college.
Did you grow up here?
I grew up in Troy.
Oh,
My husband grew up in Beverly Hills too.
okay, yeah, I grew up in Commerce. So.
But everything's just like so close, like really the
Yeah,
work.
you're in the spot where it's like it's easy to get to everything.
And it's just like so quick to go to and from work is the biggest thing, and like I'm going to and from a lot.
When I was a reporter in Saginaw, we lived like right across the street from the station for a period. Bad idea.
Well, too close.
Too close. Close enough where like if you called in, you'd be like driving down the street like.
Yeah, especially if it's not as big of a station.
And downtown Saginaw is a little bit of a ghost town. There's not a lot of people there, so it'd be like you'd see me walking around.
Oh my gosh, I remember my first market. It's so small, when people would oversleep for the morning shift.
Where was it?
They would send, Michigan, they would send people to their apartments, like knock on the door.
Jeez. Was that 9 and 10?
Yeah.
Or was it the other one?
Mhm. It's a good station, but it was small.
Yes, just
Because my first one was
give me
Lane's.
an email address before you
That
leave and I
was
can send
like
everything to you.
Less nice version of Cadillac, I would think. I was on ILX and it was not.
Okay, I'll just make sure, as long as Steve Huber has your email address.
For another
You'll be the
time.
person that sends the message out.
If
you're on
it was
the thread with
interesting
him.
for sure.
Yeah.
So then you went 9-10.
Can't write.
Yeah, and then you were at Fox 47.
The little at sign screws me up.
So.
Allie's brother's there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Allie's brother's at that station.
dogs are on there.
To a weather.
Oh.
We're on the webpage.
Good, I guess. I don't know. He makes decent pay. I was like,
It's interesting, so Fox 47 is essentially.
Not a ton, but
Yeah.
also give her back. She's actually shedding a lot. She doesn't want to shed as much.
yeah.
So she
And
sheds
it's
once or
like-
twice a year,
It's their way
which is
to
funny too, because it's usually by
test
spring. Go ahead.
what they're going to
It's usually
do.
by spring, it's not usually like in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting
Yeah,
place
she
to
gets
be.
treated like once a month.
Yeah, 'cause I think the first time that I saw you
Cause she
was
gets.
at the Emmys, because you beat one of my units into it. And I was like, who's this?
I MMJ'd that.
Nice.
Yeah, sure, thank you, I appreciate it.
That's when I knew you were the real.
Oh, I'm over there.
Okay. I'll let her go.
Sorry, we're.
You guys already white balanced?
Oh, yeah.
Somebody set?
I might actually go for it this year.
Okay, obviously, we're here to update you on the very horrific case of the 3 children in Pontiac who had been basically abandoned in a home. I'll kind of give you a little bit of an update on where we are and more specifically where the kids are, how they're doing and the kinds of things we're asking for on behalf of the kids. So one of the first questions is that we've heard from a lot of people is where was the dad during this? So to back up a little bit, the father had been incarcerated for a period of time and had no contact with the kids. When he came out, he sought the opportunity to reunite with the kids and actually filed some legal papers in court to try to get visitation and those kinds of things. A consent agreement was arrived at in 2022, but the mother still would not allow him to see the kids. So that's what we've learned so far, at least preliminarily. We're going to go back and double check all these timelines and that kind of information. So he, in essence, had lost contact with the kids. And that's where that stood. So we've had questions about that. The other questions that we've had was who were the other people potentially dropping food at the house other than the mother? So far, again, the investigation is pretty layered and complex given that it's going over years. But it appears that those are companies like an Instacart or a DoorDash, things like that. So so far, none of the people that were coming to the house had any awareness that there were kids inside or the situation in which they were delivering to. Obviously, the question was somebody dropping food off knowing there's kids there? No information at this point leads us to believe that. The kids were forensically interviewed with our partners at Care House. They've already been seen once at McLaren. We intend to have them at a much more detailed, both physical and mental health kind of checkup, if you will. That will happen hopefully this week. When our detectives saw them at their interview at Care House, they were already making amazing progress, you know, having had some tender love, having had some supportive care, having been put in new clothing and some basic hygiene. The one detective said that the little girl was talking quite a bit. So that's super exciting to see that happening. And as it relates to being in the house, the only one of the three that ever came out was the young boy, and he came out twice. Once because he wanted to feel the grass, which by itself is heartbreaking, and a second time to check the mail. So you wouldn't do this to an animal, let alone your child. So, you know, just to hear that he came out to touch the grass is just crushing, soul crushing on so many levels. As it relates to the house, you know, we have obviously released pictures. I'll get my technical expert up. You've already seen some of these pictures. I rolled that little mouse, but it didn't want to cooperate. So inside of the home, you know, as I had mentioned with these pictures, trash was piled, you know, in some places 3 and 4 foot high. Everything was covered with feces and trash. The toilet had become non-functional, and the bathtub was filled with feces. You know, I mean, that's the kind of situation these poor kids had been living in for years, not just hours or days, for years. And so when you have the complete lack of hygiene, a complete breakdown of basic living conditions that they were subjected to, and to get a little deeper into that, detectives have narrowed down the initial abandonment they believe to be somewhere in the spring to summer of 2020. Obviously, COVID played a little part in the disconnect potentially with schools and school communications. In 2020, the mother dropped off some trash bags, gloves, and Febreze, and that was about the last thing related to hygiene. 2020, in the height of COVID, okay? Towards the end, the children apparently were getting a loaf of bread dropped off that was intended to last 3 to 4 days. So, I mean, obviously on so many levels, the conditions are horrendous and the situation terrible. So what we're trying to do in the meantime, and as it relates specifically to the case, the preliminary report has been turned over to the prosecutor. We're adding some more stuff for them. They're in the process of determination. When I heard about this, I called her on the weekend and let it know it was coming, and she has her staff queued up, and they're in that process. As it relates to the kids, the first thing we wanted to do is obviously get them safe and to get them clean and get them enclosed. And I will say we have one of the most generous communities, I think, in the world. We put on there that we needed clothing, and this is just a tiny sample of what we've received. At the office of another office of ours, we have bags and bags. So we don't need any more clothing. We greatly appreciate it. The family and the kids greatly appreciate it. And so we're kind of pivoting now to financial support. And we have put up a link, if you will, to the charity Mission Oakland, and 100% of it will go to the kids. Unlike some of the traditional fundraising methodologies you see out there, they take a percentage, 100% of this will go to the kids. What I am asking is, again, our generous viewers and listeners out there and readers, we're looking for a law firm that would set up a trust fund so that we can take 100% of what we receive in donations for these kids and put it in a trust that can be administered, that can take care of maybe their medical bills, mental health visits, and if there's any overage, maybe set some money aside for their future education. This is gonna be a long-term situation, and so we'd like to be able to kind of hand the baton to a trust fund that will manage it in a way that makes sure it's just the kids. Not suggesting anybody else would do anything with it, but we're looking for a mechanism where we can hand this off. So if there's a firm out there that would like to set up a trust fund for these kids, then we'll deposit any receipts that we have. In a very short period of time, I think we've already got $15,000 to $20,000 in on our donations. So we're gonna, obviously have some real dollars to be able to give these kids, but that won't make up for the 3-4 years that they've been subjected to these conditions. I've said this more than once, but you see those videos of animals in just terrible conditions on commercials, and it pulls you at your heartstrings. Imagine maybe by 10 living in what we showed you, and then play it out over years, not days or weeks. So it's hard to wrap your head around this one. So there's gonna be a lot of long-term, I think, mental health and educational needs and things that we wanna try to help with the family to get to that point. The other thing I'd like to mention, the family is asking, apparently, some of the folks that are now involved with the kids that didn't know, that's another question we've asked, they didn't know what was going on with the kids. They had been told by her that somebody else was babysitting the children or other kinds of things. So they were unaware what was happening so far, according to our investigation. But what they're asking is they feel like they're being hounded by media outlets. So they'd like to get some privacy for their kids and the grandkids and the aunts and those folks want just a little bit of a safe bubble, if you would. So they asked that, which of course we're gonna do. Now, on another front, all of us are asking, how the heck did this happen? How did we lose 3 kids? How'd they fall through the system? The community, the relatives, the schools, how did no one know? And the easiest answer we could come up with, and I put on my old legislative hat, and thank heavens we've got a person on our staff that also had worked in the legislature, and we examined the school code. And there's some gaps that we think in part allowed this to happen. And so what we're gonna suggest is there needs to be some changes in state law. Right now, basically, there is no specific duty required that is triggered by certain actions. So what I mean by that is a school district in this case received a request for records from another school in Pontiac, but no verification the children ever moved to that school. And so at some point, when they didn't show up, they were just dropped off the enrollment of the school that sent the transcripts. So no one knew that they were nowhere. And so what we're proposing, and we're already communicating to a potential bill sponsor, is some amendments to the school code that will close that communication gap so that before a child is unenrolled, they have to obtain written confirmation that child's someplace else. That doesn't happen now. And that's what happened here, it appears. It's still, again, being investigated because we're going back years and trying to check records, but it looks like based on that request for records, neither of them knew where that child was and presumed, I guess, that the other one had the children. So the other thing, this is the specific language, but it goes into basically filling that gap, closing that hole so that if a child doesn't show up at a school for a period of time, then it triggers a follow-up where they have to communicate with either a truancy officer or law enforcement to begin an examination of what happened to these kids. Where are they? It's unbelievable to think that we've got 3 kids that fell off everybody's map for years. So that goes to the second part, as I said, within 20 days, the sending school that sent those records has to notify the truancy officer if they have not received written confirmation that that child is someplace else safe. So it shortens the window. First trigger is 10 days, second trigger is 20 days. And obviously, this can be worked on, amended, or changed by the legislature. We're just suggesting there's gotta be some accountability measures so we don't have kids fall through the cracks in such a horrific way. And that is the direct donation link to the children and their needs. So that's kind of the basics of where we are. As I said, we're gonna have some follow-up investigative things we're gonna be doing. We're gonna check much more deeply the children's physical and mental well-being. Obviously, we're gonna need to get an educational assessment on where they are. Without any education for a period of years, you hear how many kids across this country fell way behind from 1 year of COVID. Imagine where these kids are. And so we don't have a clue. Where are they educationally in terms of acuity and also mental health and all the developmental things that happen in those critical years? We don't know. And they're going to have needs with that. So it's a big undertaking, a big process, and one of the most tragic long-term abuse situations I've ever seen. I've been in this a long time. So that's kind of where we sit. Questions?
What did mom say or do to make her children so scared of leaving the house for years?
They were just scared. I don't know that she said anything particular that she's admitted to us, but they were afraid to leave. I know that much.
What's the latest with mom? I know the prosecutor's looking at this, but where is she? What's going on?
She's in custody with us.
Is she cooperating?
Yeah, I mean, she's talking to us, but we've got some follow-up secondary things that we want to ask her based on more information that's come to our attention since this originally surprisingly came to our attention when we were thinking we were going to check on her welfare and found 3 kids.
Any idea on the state of her mental health?
I have no information or background that she's got any mental health challenges, but obviously that will be all part of the case.
What's your message for everyone who's stepped up to make donations, whether that's been financial or all these supplies that have come in?
A heartfelt warm thank you to everybody that has stepped up. I mean, as I said, in very short order, we got a ton of clothing, so much we had to say, okay, we got enough of that. Let's pivot to other ways we can help, and people have jumped in on that. I honestly think we have one of the most generous communities in the world, and I've seen it time and time again. This goes back more than 20 years when I went to Ground Zero after 9/11. And so many police and fire families were decimated. And at that time, there was no mechanism. They immediately had their livelihood cut off, and these families had no income whatsoever. And so I started raising money in this area for the New York firefighters and police officers. And we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in very short order and gave it to those families before they got any assistance from anyone else. That's this community. That's the heart and soul of this community. So, I just say thank you.
What about the landlord? Usually when you're renting, the landlord or somebody will come in and do a maintenance check. What are they saying?
Well, the landlord's the one that actually called in a welfare check. He said he hadn't heard from who he thought was the tenant for a period of time, and she hadn't paid her rent since October. So, I mean, typically a landlord would respond if there's complaints about something not working. But he was unaware of any of this. He actually sent us there to check on what he thought was his tenant. And that's when we found the kids.
And what's gonna happen to that apartment or that townhouse right now? I mean, is it dangerous for the people that are, next door? It's a kind of compact area.
Yeah, that will probably be up to the health department and other folks that will have to make a determination of how they move that forward. I mean, when we process that scene for evidentiary value, our folks were wearing hazmat suits. I mean, on every level, it's a biohazard.
How about any debriefing for the officers who found that? Do they go through any kind of debriefing that's gotta be kind of hard for
Yeah, it's
Daryl.
horrific. I mean, again, I've been in this business a long time. The worst thing for our folks, our men and women on the front lines, is when they have an issue with kids. Because most of them, bring that home in a way that they look at their kid and they see the other kid in this situation and they just begin to, personalize it, and it tears them up. So thankfully, we've got a great peer-to-peer program, and that was initiated immediately once we learned what the situation was, to both debrief them and make sure that they have some opportunity to process what they were involved in and how to, in a healthy way move forward. After you see some of the terrible things we see in our world, homicides and abuse, you'll never unsee it, but you have to find a healthy way to process it and then take another step forward and go back out and continue to do your job.
Were comfort dogs like Callie brought into the kids at the hospital and things, and how did that go? And what
Yes,
was the
I think 2 came right away, and that's been, here Callie sits in this corner. Our comfort dogs have been involved in so many tragedies. When I started this program, I thought, well, this will be helpful here and there. It's almost a daily thing. It is daily if you consider how it helps our people. But, think where these dogs have been. They've been to Oxford, they've been to the splash pad scene, they've been to suicides, they've been to, one thing after another, and I think they make an amazing difference.
Do you have any information at all as to why this mom would do this for years to her children?
Not at this point. They're gonna, again, try to ask her some more questions. That's all part of the investigation, how or why. I mean, I don't think there's never gonna be an answer any of us can understand or accept on the why. How do you? I mean, anybody that's a parent looks at their kids and thinks, what a blessing, what a gift. And to allow this to happen, I don't think anyone, whether you have kids or not, will ever wrap your head around. But, maybe we can get some insight what she was thinking, but it will never satisfy any of us.
Do we know where she was living while they were living there?
Elsewhere in Pontiac.
Like a friend's house? Was it a family member?
Who was she living with?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably won't get into that at this point.
It seems just kind of elaborate that she'd go to all these lengths trying to hide it from her family and all this. I mean, what stands out about this to you, Sheriff?
Yeah, I mean, the complexity of it, the length of it, I mean, on so many levels, it's just hard, again, to wrap your head around. If you don't want to be a parent, then there's mechanisms in place. There's methodologies to either give your child up for adoption or to other family members. There's never an excuse to abuse your child or abandon your kids. There just isn't. There's so many people that are just wanting a child in their life out there. And I know there's, a lot of kids that haven't been adopted, but anything's better than this. If that's not in your wheelhouse to be a parent, then, let someone else have a chance at that role.
Thank you.
In the interactions with the children the last couple of days, does it seem like the children knew that they were being abused, or did they have any idea of reality outside of the house?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was their reality. They had no adult contact, and especially when you back up the ages, they're pretty young, and mom tells you to do something when you're, 11, 8, whatever the ages were when this all started. You're probably think, well, I guess maybe this is what happens, or this is normal. This is not normal. But, they had no benchmark. They had nothing to compare it against.
There was the TV on, all that sort of stuff that they have.
Yes. Yep. But as I said, the toilet and the bathtub were non-functional.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
20, only one of those kids went outside.
Just don't understand.
You never will. I figured that out years ago, I'm not.
These